Welcome to another episode of Management Unplugged by GR. Today we are embarking on a deep dive into, well, one of the biggest, maybe most expensive strategic decisions facing business leaders everywhere right now. The whole push for sustainability.
It's huge.
Yeah, it feels like it's no longer optional, right? It's this massive movement. You see companies rapidly adopting green practices, socially conscious stuff. But the real question that one strategists are really wrestling with isn't if they should do it, but why? Like, what's the actual financial payoff here?
That's really the core tension. I mean, we've seen this huge voluntary acceleration to sustainability adoption all over the world.
Okay.
But, for a CEO, for a chief strategy officer, it throws up a genuine strategic dilemma.
Oh.
They've got to figure out, is sustainability a strategic differentiator? Meaning, does it actually lead to better profits, give you a real lasting competitive edge? Or is it just becoming a strategic necessity, something you have to do for corporate survival, for legitimacy, but which, well, ultimately just acts as a rising cost of doing business for everyone?
That really is the $100 billion question, isn't it? Can you actually do well by doing good, get that perfect win-win? Or is the reality maybe a bit more complicated?
It often is.
So our mission in this deep dive is to try and cut through the noise, the anecdotes, and really look at the hard data. We want to show you how you might tell the difference between these two strategic approaches because, well, it seems like they have vastly different financial outcomes.
Okay, let's unpack this necessity viewpoint first. It's a pretty compelling argument, mainly because so many practices seem to be getting standardized really fast.
Precisely.
Yeah,
the argument for sustainability just being a necessity, it rests on this idea that these are becoming, well, common practices.
Okay, like what?
Think about the standard things. Putting in basic environmental management systems, maybe optimizing water usage or, waste management on the factory floor. Companies usually adopt these to grab some clear cost efficiencies.
Right. Less waste, less cost. Improves the bottom line directly.
So I see the immediate benefit there. If I stop, dumping stuff or get better at recycling my internal materials, I'm saving money. That just seems like a smart business decision, full stop. Why wouldn't that give me an advantage?
Well, because of the classic imitation problem. If your whole strategy for, say, waste reduction relies on adopting a standard filtration system you bought or some specific software package, well, your competitor can easily go out and acquire the exact same system, maybe even from the same vendor.
And suddenly they're right there with me.
Instantly. They're a parity. The practice itself isn't unique. It's not proprietary. It's not, embedded deep inside your company's culture or specific operations.
But hang on, doesn't adopting even a standard waste system still give me an advantage over the company that does absolutely nothing? I mean, that seems strategic in context, doesn't it?
It gives you a survival advantage, yes, but probably not a competitive outperformance advantage.
Okay, explain that difference.
If you don't implement these now common practices, you risk being, well, severely penalized. You could lose your social license to operate, maybe face consumer boycotts, or find you just can't attract good talent anymore.
Right.
So you need these practices because they ensure the company is seen as legitimate. You're basically just being the same as your peers, which is necessary for survival. But legitimacy, almost by definition, doesn't push you into superior above average profits.
So it's like a rising tide of expectation. What was maybe unique 5 years ago is now just the bare minimum to be taken seriously. And if you fail that necessity test, you kind of die slowly.
Exactly. It's just the cost of staying in the game now.
Okay. Here's where it gets really interesting then, because we have to talk about the other side. This idea that sustainability can be the core of a strategic differentiator. If we think back to the classic definition of strategy, it's all about being different, right? Choosing a unique and valuable position.
And this is the potential promised land, isn't it? The payoff of truly doing well by doing good. When sustainability acts as a differentiator, it means the company has actually designed an entire system, a whole set of integrated activities that are unique and, crucially, much more difficult for competitors to just copy or acquire.
Right. You can't just write a check to some vendor for this kind of strategy. It has to be proprietary, internal somehow. But, how do you make something like being green truly proprietary? That feels tricky.
It really requires deep organizational integration and some fundamental strategic choices. We're talking about building competitive advantage that's rooted in complexity.
Okay, give me an example.
Well, look at some of the really innovative circular economy-based business models. It's not just about recycling a bit more. It's designing the entire product right from the start so that basically every component is recoverable, reusable, maybe re-engineered back into the supply chain and doing that at scale.
Okay, but why is that so hard for a competitor to copy? Can't they just start designing for circularity too?
They can try,
Yeah.
but think about what it touches. It requires redesigning R&D processes, probably retraining your workforce, maybe even rebuilding manufacturing lines, negotiating completely new kinds of procurement contracts, owning the logistics challenge of getting the products back.
Wow. Okay. It's everything.
Yeah, a competitor can't just adopt one little piece. They have to replicate the whole interdependent system. And that complexity, that's the competitive moat.
That makes a lot more sense. It's not a single practice. It's a whole integrated operational machine working differently. What about the S and ESG, the social side? Can that be a
Yeah.
differentiator?
Absolutely. On the social side, the differentiators often relate to human capital. So practices that don't just, avoid labor problems, but actively and significantly enhance how you recruit, engage, and retain employees long term.
How so?
Well, imagine if your environmental and social mission is so genuinely compelling that you consistently attract, say, the top 10% of talent in your field,
Hmm.
and they stay longer and they perform better than the employees at your rivals' companies. That is a highly unique and very sticky competitive advantage. You simply cannot buy that kind of organizational culture or deep employee loyalty off the shelf.
Okay, so we've got the theory laid out. Calming practices are easy to copy, necessary for survival. Strategic practices are complex, proprietary, designed for actual outperformance. But what does the data really say about which approach, wins financially?
Yeah, that's where the analysis gets really fascinating. Researchers took a hard look at the sustainability practices of thousands of companies across many different industries over a pretty significant period, I think it was 2012 to 2017. They were trying to figure out which practices actually yielded genuine financial returns.
I have to admit, I'm a bit skeptical here. How on earth did they isolate the specific financial impact of, say, ethical labor sourcing versus, I don't know, a new efficiency on the factory floor? That sounds incredibly difficult.
It is difficult, but they started with something they called the convergence fact. What they observed was that within most industries, sustainability practices actually converged over time,
Converged, meaning,
meaning that, on average, firms adopted increasingly similar sets of practices during that period. It suggests the bar for what's considered acceptable or standard behavior was constantly rising, pushing many initiatives towards becoming, well, those strategic necessities we talked about.
okay, so the industry is kind of self-regulating by copying the easiest or most obviously effective practices first. Everyone gradually starts to look more alike on these issues.
Exactly. And that convergence allowed the researchers to make a really crucial distinction for their performance analysis. They basically isolated two groups.
Which were?
Okay, so first, those practices upon which companies within an industry converged over time,
Mm,
the ones everyone started doing, they labeled those common practices. These were essentially the easily imitated necessities.
got it. And the other group?
The other group were those practices where companies did not converge. The really unique, maybe path-dependent systems or approaches that only a few firms shared. Those were labeled strategic practices.
That's fascinating. So they use the convergence trend itself to separate the standard stuff from the truly unique stuff, and then applied that lens to the financials. Okay, now this feels like the core of mystery. What did the financial breakdown actually look like when comparing those two?
Right. This is where we really see the payoff for genuine competitive strategy. The adoption of strategic practices. The unique stuff was significantly and positively associated with two key positive outcomes:
Okay.
better return on capital, or ROC,
Right.
and higher market valuation multiples.
Okay, let's slow down on those terms for a sec because this feels like the critical insight. Return on capital, ROC. That's basically how efficiently I'm using my existing investments, my capital, to generate actual profit, right? That's about internal operational excellence.
Correct. Yeah, it means you're running a more profitable, more efficient business internally. And then market valuation multiples, those relate more to how the market, how investors perceive your company's future value. A higher multiple suggests investors see you as less risky, more stable, perhaps with better long-term growth prospects.
So, if I successfully pursue these unique, hard-to-copy strategic practices, I potentially get the gold standard. I improve my core operational profitability, and the market rewards me externally for being a stable, unique, valuable investment. It's the true win-win.
Precisely. That is the differentiation payoff in action.
Okay, crystal clear. Now, what about the common practices? The stuff everyone eventually does just to stay legitimate. What was the financial link there?
Well, in contrast, the adoption of common practices was positively associated only with higher market valuation multiples.
Only valuation.
Only valuation multiples. It was not associated with better return on capital.
Wait, let me just make sure I get the implication there. If I implement all the basic common sustainability systems, the ones everyone is adopting, the market looks at me and says, okay, you're legitimate, you're not some huge hidden liability, and gives me a better valuation multiple. So my stock looks relatively better or less risky.
Yes, that seems to be the effect.
But internally, those common actions don't actually make my core business any more profitable or efficient compared to my competitors who are doing the same common thing. So I get market credit for perception, maybe for risk reduction, but not for actual operational outperformance.
That is the essential finding, yes. Common practices are clearly crucial because they stabilize that perceived value. They ensure survival and legitimacy in the eyes of investors, customers, employees, which is important for things like liquidity and access to capital.
Sure.
But because they are easily copied, they don't drive superior internal operating profits the way that unique, strategic, integrated activities apparently do.
Wow. That's a huge distinction that I suspect most executives might miss. You know, they assume that if they just check all the sustainability boxes, they'll automatically see profit benefits across the board. But the data here clearly shows that simple box checking might only get you halfway there.
It seems so. It protects you from the downside, perhaps the legitimacy risk, but it doesn't necessarily guarantee the upside of outperformance.
It really confirms that sustainability isn't just one monolithic thing, strategy-wise. You probably need both types of practices to survive and thrive, but they achieve different things.
Exactly. You need the common stuff to survive, but it looks like you need the strategic, unique stuff to truly thrive and outperform.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener, maybe running a business or trying to set strategy right now? How do we boil this down?
Well, I think the main conclusion is pretty clear.
Mm-hmm.
Some sustainability activities are essentially becoming best practice. They're a necessity for market legitimacy. And failure to adopt them will likely lead to some kind of penalty, maybe in a market, maybe in losing the best talent.
Right. The cost of doing business.
Exactly. However, the companies that seem to be truly gaining that tangible financial advantage, the ones actually doing well financially from sustainability, are those that focus on creating unique, difficult-to-match strategies. Things that competitors just can't easily acquire or imitate. It really seems to be about achieving uniqueness through complex integration, not just simple compliance.
That is a great synthesis of the data. And finally, just to leave you with one last idea for reflection, something else the researchers noted was why this convergence on common practices happens. Any thoughts there?
Yeah, they found it tends to happen faster when the industry market leader, the big player, adopts certain practices early on.
Ah, interesting. So if the giant in your field implements some new sustainable system.
You can probably bet that practice is on its way to becoming a strategic necessity for everyone else within the next few years. So yeah, you need to watch the leaders very closely.
Makes sense. Anything else driving convergence?
They also noted that convergence seems to move faster in industries where environmental and social issues, think pollution, labor practices, are kind of dominant concerns compared to, say, governance issues.
Okay, why would that be?
Well, it suggests that maybe public and consumer pressure on those really tangible outcomes, like pollution or worker safety, can rapidly force everyone in the industry to adopt the same minimum standard. So it might be useful to map where your industry is most vulnerable to public pressure. Those might be the practices that will become necessities the quickest.
Fascinating stuff to think about. Really highlights the difference between just keeping up and actually getting ahead with sustainability.
Absolutely. It's not just one strategy fits all.
See you later. Bye-bye.